beautiful morning here in Charleston. We're at Liberty Square, and we're going to go out there and take a ride over to Fort Sumter.
Part of a big fort building program that started after the War of 1812. So technically we are not going to a Civil War fort. There's going to be 42 new forts in this building program. They're going to be bigger and better than anything built before. They're going to plug a lot of holes, and the construction on these forts gets underway around 1819. Charleston's going to get one of the newer forts in addition to the three older forts that we already have in the harbor. Older fort out there, which is Fort Moultrie on Sullivan's Island. The third Fort Moultrie is still there. You can drive out to Sullivan's Island and visit that. It's open every day. Took over a dozen years just to build the foundation. And then it's time to start building the fort. Now the Army will buy a total of 4.5 million bricks. They were handmade by an enslaved man, woman, or child that labored in those old plantation brickyards. Used to tower 50 feet off the water, a basic pentagon on 4 sides of the pentagon, cannons on 3 levels. And then fully staffed it because the country's going to war very quickly. After the election of Abraham Lincoln, and you know, election Abraham Lincoln wins it. Lincoln and his party were generally considered anti-slavery. The southern states say, we've had enough. We are not getting on the fast track to the abolition of slavery. So South Carolina will lead the way December 20th, 1860. Other southern states will follow. They believe that they rightfully inherit all federal properties. Government in Washington is screaming bloody murder. We're not giving you anything. Federal properties down south are easily taken over by southern militias. And in some cases, you can't do a darn thing about it because the nearest U.S. soldiers might be hundreds of miles away from you. And he has a total of 85 soldiers. That's it. 13 of the 85 are musicians. They're the Fort's band. South Carolina secedes from the Union, sends a message to Major Anderson, y'all need to pack up and get out of here. And be prepared to turn all Army property over to South Carolina. Rowboats going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Move everybody over to Fort Sumter. At least it's more defendable, you got water around you. So Fort Moultrie is abandoned. They actually pull it off. Nobody is ever the wiser until folks around the harbor see a big U.S. flag go up over Fort Sumter the next morning. Abraham Lincoln becomes president of the United States, but between his election and inauguration, 7 southern states have separated. And amongst all the debriefs that old Abe has to go through, he is told about the forts on the southern coastline still under the U.S. flag. Cannons set up on the islands around Fort Sumter will be the key. That's the site of Fort Johnson. Not much of a fort left out there, but that is where the first shot of the Civil War will come from. So we're entering cannon range. A 1.25 miles is about the average range for the old smoothbore guns of the day. It's an event that's going to change the country's history. Major Anderson has been to return fire at 7 a.m. The ships from New York appeared later in the day. They could do nothing because they sailed up to a firefight. They wisely drop anchor offshore and watch and wait. Ringside seat for the battle, 34 hours start to finish. Fort Sumter will give up on the afternoon of the second day because supplies are exhausted and you only got under 100 men. Oh, and by the way, Charleston cut off your grocery lines when the ships left New York. So what's in the pantry out there is all you're ever going to get. So the fighting stopped on the afternoon of the 13th. The men will depart on the 14th. They actually are ferried out to the ships laying offshore. Goodbye, South Carolina. The Confederates claim their prize. But on the 15th, Abraham Lincoln begins, and he's 75,000 men in the first call up. The Confederates dug in for the long haul. The siege of Charleston is going on 1.5 years later. We're the most bombed area in all of North America to this day. Almost tauntingly telling the U.S. side, you Yankees are never going to get your hands on Fort Sumter ever again. We will fight to the last man. If you can't get them out of there, you've got to knock it down around them. And that's a sad, ironic part. That once magnificent structure that the U.S. Army worked on for 30 years and never quite finished because of the other side inside of it refusing to give it up. That same U.S. Army turned their guns on it and knocked most of it down in about an 8-month period, appearing to attack our coastal cities. But the technology is well beyond that.
Ferry boat out here in the morning, here when they raise the flag, and they're about to do that.
Definitely will.
This is the flag that would have flown here in the beginning of the Civil War. There's 31 stars. Inside the fort, you can tell these bricks are very old, made locally by slaves. These are Civil War era cannons. 15-inch Rodman, designed by a guy in the Army Ordnance. This particular gun somehow got buried, and it was uncovered in 1959. Located here where they've bricked it in. And this is a mortar. This one's a 10-inch. 2,225 yards. Union gunners fire on Fort Sumter from Morris Island. They reduced most of the fort to rubble during a 22-month siege, 1863 to 65. We show some of the damage. These are dirt mounds. Ammunition shots much better than brick. On April 7th, 1863, the Union Navy sent its new force of ironclad warships, 8 monitors and the frigate New Ironsides, to attack Fort Sumter. Retreated after 2 hours. Admiral DuPont said, "We have met with a sad repulse. I shall not turn it into a great disaster." This is a howitzer. Here's a view from the top. There's our ferry. It's a model of what the fort looked like in April of 1861 before the Confederates. Stood 3 major and 8 minor bombardments. The brick walls were pounded into rubble, but the Confederates refused to surrender. They evacuated in February 1865, leaving the ruins to be claimed at long last by the Union forces. Picture of what it looks like now. I believe this is Fort Moultrie. Hall. It's a Ravenel Bridge.
Island is called Chutes Folly Island. It is a shell of its former self. Maybe you got about 7%, 5% of the island left. But the little fort is known as Castle Pinckney. Now it is named after an author and signer of the United States Constitution here in South Carolina, Charles Cotesworth Pinckney. With the smaller one, because that one's going to disappear out of view first. So that smaller gray vessel, that is a United States destroyer known as the Laffey. It is known as the ship that would not die. During World War II, it gets hit with 6 kamikaze planes, attacked over 20 times, and as the name suggests, it never goes down. That is an aircraft carrier known as the USS Yorktown. It is named after the Yorktown that was lost in the Battle of Midway during World War II. This Yorktown, also active until the 1970s, and took a part of the Apollo 8 space mission. Same thing, once it got decommissioned, turned into a state museum, and that whole entity over there is known as Patriots Point Maritime and Naval Museum. If you really like maritime or naval history, definitely the area for you to go and check out. There is a lot to see over there.